Godfrey follows the class's greeting from just behind the girl with the golden white ponytail as the curly-haired man enters with a book in hand. Edwin introduces the transfer students, and Isolde Pendragon gives her name as whispers ripple through the sophomores. Godfrey introduced himself next, only to be immediately insulted by Dale and dismissed by the snow-white-haired boy. Edwin reprimanded the class, but the insults continued, and Godfrey felt the sting of being seen as a failure for never awakening his summoning abilities. Edwin invited Godfrey to sit as class was about to begin, while Godfrey watched Isolde take a seat by the window and listened to Edwin mention the awakening ceremony for the next morning, prompting muffled snickers from the class. Godfrey nodded quietly, accustomed to the mockery, as Edwin began the lesson by speaking about the first summoner, Adam, and the Monkey King. Edwin introduced the day's topic about dungeon gates while Godfrey ignored the discussion and watched the window, then stood as the bell rang and saw Dale approaching with two others. Dale introduced himself to Isolde, who ignored him and walked away. Dale laughed, confronted Godfrey, and insulted him and his father, but Godfrey kept walking until an arm suddenly hooked around his neck. Siegfried appears beside Dale and mocks Godfrey for being scared, while Godfrey realizes that Snow is trailing them as their lackey. Godfrey teeters over the cafeteria balcony rail on the third floor as Siegfried watches him with a cold, unsettling stare. Someone's grip on his jacket kept Godfrey from falling, and the students nearby stared in shock, wondering whether he had jumped. Snow claimed that Godfrey had climbed the rail on his own, and the students reacted in shock as Isolde asked whether Godfrey was all right while Siegfried mocked his near fall. Godfrey narrowed his ocean blue eyes and pushed through the crowd toward the cafeteria's center while Isolde followed him with effortless grace. Siegfried shouted at Godfrey to shut his mouth, then lunged and was thrown hard to the floor before roaring that he would kill Godfrey as he scrambled back up. Siegfried struck with a powerful punch, but Godfrey raised his forearm and blocked it without flinching. Siegfried froze, losing connection with his beast and strength. Godfrey struck Siegfried across the face, then delivered an uppercut that lifted Siegfried off his feet and sent him sprawling. The students gasp in disbelief as Cecil mutters that Godfrey has beaten Siegfried, and Dale chuckles while mocking Snow's stunned silence. Another lackey lunged at Godfrey too quickly to follow, and Godfrey was struck down before the cafeteria fell silent. Isolde stood over Godfrey's crumpled form and told him that giving him a fair fight was stupid because he was doomed from the start. Godfrey forced himself upright and met her eyes, thanking her and explaining that Snow had received exactly what he deserved. Godfrey lies on a narrow sickbed in the academy infirmary as the healing magic leaves him drowsy. The nurse commented on Godfrey's beating and reminded him that Manhattan High was for monsters and those who serve them. A knock sounded at the door, and Isolde asked the nurse to make sure Godfrey ate by bringing him something. The nurse then returned with a tray and a folded note tucked beneath the plate. Godfrey muttered that one could not help overthinking such a message, while the nurse urged him to rest and warned that missing the awakening ceremony tomorrow could keep him from rising beyond the low tier. Godfrey nodded as the next morning's sun lit the academy courtyard, where freshmen and outsiders gathered around him while he stood with clenched fists, waiting for his chance to awaken a summon. He knew that failure here would prove he had no summon and no future, and that his acceptance into Manhattan High depended on possessing at least an elite-tier beast. At the courtyard's center, the headmaster stepped forward in a pinstripe suit and announced that the ceremony would begin immediately, warning that today would determine their lives. The headmaster names Godfrey Daniels while locking his gaze on the teen in Manhattan's jacket, and Godfrey looks down at the slip of paper in his hand. Godfrey ascends the hexagonal platform and closes his eyes to enter his soul space before his summon. Godfrey obeyed as the dungeon cores glowed faintly and felt himself drawn inward. He stood on a massive white marble staircase before a colossal wooden double door crowned by a radiant sun. He looked around, confused by the absence of darkness and the unusual setting, then stepped forward until he stood before the great door. He pushed the door open gently, and the headmaster exclaimed in shock as the woman whispered the tablet reading before correcting it to 12.1, revealing king-tier potential. A golden diagram flares above Godfrey as the armored figure descends in a thunderous crash, dazzling the students at the windows. The woman announced that Godfrey had summoned a humanoid creature of tier 3.0 with potential 6.0, then glanced furtively at the headmaster. The headmaster ordered Godfrey to descend while watching him closely and weighing the boy's true potential. Godfrey met the man's disdainful gaze without reaction, then remembered the stone door symbol and the glimpse beyond it as he realized the knight was only part of a larger summon. Back in the classroom, Godfrey faced the mocking and pity of his classmates as Dale sneered at his summon and Siegfried challenged him to combat class before walking out with the others. Only Isolde remained, calling the knight cool, while Godfrey dismissed her claim and doubted that a low-tier summon could offer any advantage. Isolde's white-scaled beast stretches its leathery wings and bares its needle-like teeth in the open-roof arena. Dale stands facing the white wyvern with his massive lightning charge supercharged bull summon at his side. Its body was covered in black, chitinous plating strong enough to deflect bullets, and the armored Emperor Bull stood revealed as a Tier 5.2 beast with a potential of 6.2. Dale smirked with restrained confidence as he boasted that his bull was already a high Tier 6.1 and could command lightning, while Isolde answered curtly and her wyvern fixed a cold stare on the bull. Dale signaled his summon as it surged forward, lightning crackling across the stone platform before the charging bull froze solid in ice. The frozen bull detonates the lightning trapped within its ice, and the wyvern's massive tail hurls it across the arena as blood spills from its jaws. Dale's hands tremble with faint lightning along his arms as the combat instructor declares Isolde the winner and orders him to retrieve his summon and recover. Godfrey watched Isolde return to the stands as the crowd followed her with admiration, and she answered his silent praise with a proud smile. Snow snapped his fingers, and the butterfly flapped its wings once, releasing multicolored light that melted the petrification. The girl collapsed, trembling and tearful. As the instructor warned Snow to go easy next time because they were classmates, and Snow replied that he had already held back before stepping down from the platform. The instructor calls Godfrey Daniels forward, and Godfrey steps up with clenched fists to face his smirking opponent. Godfrey briefly closes his eyes as he recalls the glowing words etched into the stone tablet beside the throne where he found his knight summon. In blackout state, the knight surpasses base strength, rises to greater heights, and mimics the foe's abilities. Godfrey names the summon Mountain as the towering knight emerges beside the blazing golden diagram. Mountain moved past Godfrey, raised his great shield, and poised his sword to strike as the iron-clawed crab slammed into the shield and was blasted back by the glowing runes. The girl and her summon recoiled in shock as Mountain lowered his shield and cleaved through one of the crab's steel claws with a massive blade. Blood spurted across the platform as Mountain drove his ironclad boot into the crab's chest, then froze with his sword hovering above the creature's head when Godfrey shouted for him to stop. The arena falls silent as Godfrey stands in stunned disbelief, recalling that his summon was an alchemically altered knight captain meant to slay monstrous beasts. His eyes widened as he realized the implication. Human souls were beginning to manifest these creatures within themselves, even though their true origin remained the dungeon gates. Isolde interrupted Godfrey's thoughts and reassured him that there was no permanent damage after the nurse reattached the crab's claw. Godfrey admitted that he had not expected the spar to unfold that way, and Isolde teased him for acting so high and mighty. As classes ended, Isolde explained that her parents had arranged an apartment for her outside the school instead of a dormitory room. She waved goodbye and left in the car. Godfrey sighed and headed toward the boys' dorms, eager to explore his soul space and the palace within. Godfrey walks slowly along the quiet campus path as Sam blocks his way and sneers at him. Sam accused Godfrey of summoning a useless humanoid and flaunting his knight's sword on his sister's crab, then clenched his fist as an iron-scaled armadillo emerged from a golden diagram. The iron-scaled armadillo compresses into a spinning golden sphere and slams into Godfrey, hurling him onto the pavement as flames burst from its plated body. Sam loomed over Godfrey as scales spread across his forearm, and he raised a clawed hand to declare Godfrey dead, but Godfrey summoned Mountain just in time. Mountain's horizontal slash forces Sam to switch places with his beast and take the blow himself. Sam then chuckles darkly and orders his summon to sweep down with blazing claws. Godfrey rolled away just in time, feeling the searing heat, and then ordered the use of blackout state when he saw Mountain could not match the elite tier summon in his current condition. Mountain's armor darkens to crimson as his black longsword and blood-red shield blaze with darker, more violent flames, and he drives the armadillo into the wall with a brutal burning charge. Sam's smirk vanished as the armadillo tried to curl defensively, but Mountain shattered its stance and raised his sword for the killing strike. Sam screamed for him to stop. Mountain turned toward Godfrey, holding his sword low and his shield steady, while Godfrey ordered a retreat so Sam could recall the summon, and the strain of blackout state showed on everyone present. Mountain's power surged from 3.0 to 4.0, but Godfrey's face went pale, his body trembled, and his breathing became uneven. Most new summoners needed time to strengthen their bond enough to maintain summons beyond a few minutes. With time, they could keep summons manifested for hours, days, or even an entire year without rest. Godfrey walked past Sam and told him to cherish the mercy he had shown today. Godfrey stood frozen in disbelief at his defeat as Siegfried's mocking voice made him stop and turn to face the approaching threat. Maldred's quills pierce Godfrey's forearms, and as dizziness hits him, Siegfried lunges in with jade-like claws and clamps a hand over Godfrey's face. Siegfried slammed Godfrey into the wall, then crouched beside the unconscious boy and mocked what the Pendragon girl could see in him. Maldred strolled past Sam, whose gaze drifted toward Snow, and Sam's humiliation faded into twisted satisfaction as he judged Godfrey to be nothing before true talents. Godfrey opens his blue eyes to find the school nurse leaning over him after she has treated his wounds bones and explained why the shock knocked him unconscious. She asked if he could apologize to his classmates, reasoning that they were supposed to be friends. Godfrey snapped that he would not apologize to people who wanted him as their lapdog, then forced himself to calm down and apologized for yelling. Godfrey recalled that summons grew slowly within the soul space. Battles accelerated their growth, but the true catalyst was the dungeon core found only in Green Gates. Mountain was still a low-tier fighter, but Godfrey could push him to Elite Tier 4.0, where Blackout State would let him rival a 5.0 and his unique weapons could injure foes slightly above his level. The next day in the classroom, Mr. Edwin dropped his book on the desk and announced that Mr. Godfrey Daniels had been severely injured yesterday and would be away for a few weeks before returning for the ranking competition at the end of the month. He reminded the students that those who made the top 3 had higher chances of graduating as valedictorians and their summons potential would be boosted. The classroom erupts in whispers as Siegfried scoffs about Godfrey running after a simple head bump, while Isolde watches coldly and the defeated girl sneers about Manhattan and his father's name. Dale scowled and cut in that the girl's brother only picked a fight with Godfrey because she had been beaten by a humanoid summon. The girl's face turned pale and she shut her lips as the class fell into uneasy silence over Isolde's time with Godfrey. Several sessions later, Cecil stepped out of the female bathroom and froze as a male voice announced that a king tier had been detected yesterday, while a woman added that the headmaster and she had first assumed it was a mistake. The student was Godfrey Daniels, the sophomore transfer, and Cecil covered her mouth with trembling hands, stunned that Godfrey could be a king tier summoner. She recalled that king tiers were legends, and she found it impossible that Godfrey, who could barely defend himself, possessed such a rank. Returning to the cafeteria, she searched for Siegfried, the one who had humiliated Godfrey. She clenched her fists, refusing to believe the rumors about Godfrey being king tier, and felt that something was very wrong. Godfrey walked through the airport terminal carrying a traveling bag, wearing a plain white hood and black pants, and noticed a group of guys and girls pointing at him as if he were a celebrity. Godfrey lifted his gaze to the screen above the terminal and watched the female news anchor report a spike in Green Gate dungeons across Amazon City, warning citizens to stay cautious because of missing persons in districts A, B, K, and L. He arrives at the property, passes through the open gate, and heads into the courtyard toward the house. Godfrey navigated the maze with ease and entered the sitting room, where a brown-haired woman wearing an apron and oven mitts held a phone to her ear. She told the director that her son was on his way and that she wanted to surprise him, but the director replied sternly that she could not take time off. The call has ended, and Godfrey stands in the doorway as the woman gently caresses his hair, kisses his forehead, and tells him she has prepared his favorite lunch. Godfrey scoffed and followed her outside after lunch, then watched as she asked Victoria to take care of him before getting into her car. Godfrey shook his head as he watched Victoria carry away the remains of his lunch. Godfrey clenched his fist and closed his eyes as he stood in his soul space before the endless white staircase, resolved to grow stronger for his mother's sake. Mountain rose with his shield and long sword and knelt before Godfrey as Godfrey laid a hand on his pauldron and told him to stand. Mountain obeyed, and Godfrey studied the walls covered with drawings of a knight and a shifting, chameleon-like beast that copied its foe's abilities. Ancient texts accompanied the mural, but the drawings told enough. Mountain was an alchemically altered hybrid, a primal and chimera combined, a summon that could never exist naturally. Ahead stood a second door carved with a symbol of a massive warbow with a lightning bolt inside a circle. Mountain pushed with all his might, but the solid stone door did not budge. Godfrey opened his eyes back in the real world, rose to his feet, and walked toward his bedroom to rest before researching the spreading Green Gate dungeons. Upon entering his room, Godfrey's instincts screamed in alarm, and his body summoned Mountain instantly. 20 meters ahead, 2 hulking green-skinned orcs awaited, and one bellowed a guttural command before both charged forward. Mountain intercepted the first orc's blow with his shield, shattering the orc's arm by reflecting the impact. He then parried the second orc's cudgel and drove an ironclad boot into its chest, hurling it into the wall. Mountain crushed the first orc with a shield bash, caving its skull, then spun fluidly and hurled his long sword, piercing the second orc's chest and pinning it against the wall. Another orc leaped from the staircase landing, aiming both feet at Mountain's shield. The collision snapped the orc's legs, causing it to crumple in agony. Mountain parries the last 2 orc swings and cuts them down with precision, leaving all 5 orcs dead within 2 minutes. Godfrey studied Mountain closely, then focused and activated his bond as thick golden armor materialized around him. Godfrey summoned Mountain's echoing sword and shield, dismissed the shield when it drained his strength, and then followed Mountain up the staircase with the long sword resting over his shoulder. Mountain kicked the doors open, revealing a grand hallway lined with towering weathered pillars as 4 crimson-skinned orcs advanced with raised axes. Godfrey cerca hacia delante, corta el cuello del primer orco rojo, y remata otro mientras Mountain lo apoya con su escudo y su espada. The orc dropped, Mountain had already dispatched the other 2, and Godfrey Godfrey laughed while pointing toward the looming double gate ahead. Mountain mirrored his stance and followed as the door burst open to reveal the boss's lair, where Godfrey stood with Echo gone and a black-skinned orc waited in the moonlight with a gargantuan axe. Rings of obsidian black hung from its tusked jaws, and long braided locks woven with beast fangs trailed from its head as the black orc rumbled a cold question about the fallen orcs outside. Mountain intercepted the orc's downward axe swing aimed at his head, but the axe sank deep into his shield, neutralizing its reflection. Cracks spidered across the stone beneath Mountain's boots as his feet sank into the floor. The orc growls with bloodshot eyes full of murderous hunger as Godfrey orders Mountain to use blackout state and slips behind a pillar. In the dungeon hall, Mountain's golden armor darkens into a crimson-black sheen while he radiates killing intent. He forced the orc back with a roar and ripped a deep gash across its abdomen, then raised his shield instinctively to catch the next strike. The orc's wound sealed almost instantly. The armored orc roared, stomped forward, and slammed its feet against Mountain's shield before Mountain slipped aside and drove his blade through the orc's abdomen, leaving the orc clamped onto his shoulders as it forced him to one knee. The orc struck Mountain's chin with a knee, then sent him crashing through a stone pillar, and Mountain rose from the debris as his armor and shield remolded and sealed. He flexed his gauntlet fist, lifted his shield, and charged. The orc reeled back from the collision as Godfrey surged forward from behind, summoned his longsword, and timed his strike perfectly. Mountain slams the orc's skull sideways with his shield while Godfrey drives his sword through the back of its head, and the black dungeon boss collapses lifelessly to the ground. Mountain's dark cloak shimmered back to pure white, his armor returned to golden brilliance, and he grasped the glowing red orb as its immense mana surged into him. Godfrey's muscles swell and tighten as his power rises from 3.0 to 3.2, and he drives his fist into the pillar, shattering a large section of stone. Godfrey spun toward the doorway, startled by Victoria's pale, breathless presence. She had traced the green dungeon's energy to Godfrey's room and nearly fainted upon seeing him drenched in green blood with a knight beside him. Victoria scoffed, told him to pull up his pants and take a bath, and said she would inform his mother about the green dungeon gate. Godfrey told her not to tell his mother if she didn't want to. Godfrey dismissed Victoria and opened a portal after jokingly asking Mountain whether he needed a bath. Godfrey shifts his gaze toward the tall window at the far end of his third-floor bedroom. Godfrey watched the remains of the Roland Daniels statue, raised in honor of his father's sacrifice, as workers dismantled it piece by piece. From his vantage point, the buildings obscured the figure from the shoulders down, but the desecration was evident. He asked why they were bringing it down, and Victoria explained that the statue had stood for 16 years before the mayor ordered its replacement to honor the Pagoda Guild. Honoring the guild with a statue would win the city's favor, and Godfrey stared at the broken monument with a clenched jaw as he thought of his father's sacrifice. Now, they tore down his statue for a guild, which felt like showing the same gratitude to a man who gave a free ride and to a paid taxi driver. After a long bath, Godfrey managed to rest before dinner. Valentina has entered the sitting room, dropped her bag, and now smothers Godfrey into her bosom with a radiant smile as Victoria arrives with dishes at the table. Godfrey tilted his chair back and gave a fake frown while Valentina teased him with affectionate kisses until he groaned that he was not angry. Valentina chuckled, brushed his hair back, and settled beside him while asking how school was and whether he had made any friends. Godfrey glanced toward her and then toward Victoria, who was avoiding the topic of his summon. Valentina had already asked if he was okay, and later that night Godfrey sat at his desk with his laptop open, searching for green dungeons. Godfrey scrolls through the flood of false alarms and then opens a new message from Isolde inviting him to a competition at the end of the month. Godfrey asked how she got his contact, and Isolde replied that she had asked the headmaster, leaving him stunned. Godfrey's cheeks heated as he saw her golden eyes glowing warmly and her hair unbound, looking enchanting compared to the cold, untouchable girl at school. He found himself liking this side of her. Closing the laptop, Godfrey gazed out the window at the dark sky and glittering buildings, and his mood soured again as he looked toward the headless statue in the distance. Leaning back in his chair, he shut his eyes and entered his soul space, then froze when he saw the right side of the wall had begun turning from stone into wood. He realized that Mountain's door was completely wooden, which allowed summoning, and that if this wall fully transformed, the second door could be opened. He deduced that Mountain had advanced from tier 3.0 to 3.2, and making Mountain grow would grant him access to the second Knight Captain. Godfrey folded his arms and contemplated his next step before leaving the soul space. Then the next morning a taxi rolled down the slope street and came to a stop among the high-rise apartments. Godfrey climbed out with a backpack over his shoulder, wearing strong jeans, a black top, and a dagger strapped to his waist. Godfrey snaps his head left toward the railing as a multilingual parrot blinks at him and a black and white cat huffs smoke and flame behind it. Godfrey chuckled quietly at the thought of the common summons and kept walking with his backpack in hand. This district differed from his own, and Godfrey fixed his gaze on the 10-story building ahead, a long-abandoned company tower standing in the neglected street. Reports indicated that a summoner had lost his beast there, and the building was clearly a green gate dungeon that no guild had yet bothered to clear. As he moved closer, he passed a courier hauling a massive refrigerator carried by his summon, the warrior ant, which moved the 200-liter appliance as if it weighed nothing. Godfrey kept walking until he stood before the looming building, studying the torn yellow tape across the entrance and the hidden vehicle nearby. Decidido a investigar, Godfrey impujo la puerta y entro en una vasta caverna lina de casi 50 enormes capullos de piedra que pulsaban con una luz azul profunda. Godfrey stepped back and hit the wall, realizing there was no way out. Godfrey summoned Mountain at once, ready for the 3 intruders who had come for the dungeon core. Natasha, the woman, mocked the bravery of young summoners. The big man ordered Godfrey to leave, but Godfrey indicated there was no exit. The hulking man grew angry, but the beanie-wearing man stepped on a small stone that sank inward, causing the cavern to shake and a heavy thud to echo. Godfrey and the trio sprint toward the massive door beyond the cocoons as one cocoon bursts open beside him, releasing a towering werewolf. Mountain slammed his shield into the beast, hurled it sideways, and crushed its skull beneath a boot as Natasha reacted in surprise to Mountain's golem nature and ordered her men, while the hulking man and the beanie-wearing man summoned a massive hound and a black direwolf. The trio pushed open the huge door and sent their beasts charging at Godfrey. Godfrey used Echo to summon Mountain's longsword and then exchanged places with Mountain. Mountain charged through the 2 beasts, moving with speed and weight that overwhelmed them. Mountain slammed into the door, breaking it open and throwing Natasha's men aside. Natasha staggered back as Mountain advanced, his golden armor stained with blood, while Godfrey sprinted toward the entrance with nearly 50 werewolves behind him. Godfrey covers his left forearm with the Echo gauntlet and vambraces and drives his fist into the werewolf's snout, stunning it. He snapped its neck and stomped another werewolf before bolting up the staircase. He grabbed a spear from a skeleton and rushed inside as Mountain slammed the door shut and jammed it with the spear. The door shook violently under the werewolf's assault. Natasha smirked as she praised Godfrey's summoning skill and invited him to join her group, just as Mountain's steel flashed through the massive hound and the hulking man collapsed with blood spilling from his mouth. Mountain's voice rumbles as he declares that no order is needed from Godfrey, then drives his shield against the door and hurls his long sword through the dire wolf and the wood. The beanie man swapped places with his wolf at the last second, narrowly dodging death. The dire wolf lunged again, sinking its jaws into Mountain's right vambrace, and Mountain lifted the beast overhead before slamming it into the stone as the cavern trembled. The wolf whined pitifully before Mountain snapped its neck, and the beanie man lunged at Godfrey with 2 daggers before freezing as blood burst from his lips and he collapsed at Godfrey's feet. Godfrey barely had time to breathe when instinct screamed at him, and he leaned hard to the side as a huge tongue lashed past him like a whip. Whipping around, Godfrey sees a dark green frog lunge again, but Mountain steps in front of him and takes the hit on his armor as saliva splatters across the metal. Mountain is slammed into the cavern floor as dust and rock rain down around him. The swollen beast bounced, dragged Mountain with its tongue, and hurled him into the wall before Godfrey could react. Natasha said the frog was a bloating venomous frog, tier 4.5, an elite 3.5 beast with the potential to reach 5.0, and she brandished her venom-slick whip while promising to watch Mountain turn into a ball. Godfrey tightened his grip on his longsword and said that no one had said he had only a few tricks. Mountain's armor turned deep crimson as he entered blackout state, and Godfrey's armor burned crimson as well, his white scarab bleeding into black and his pupils glowing dark red. Strength surged through Godfrey as he charged, and the stone beneath his boots imploded. Natasha snapped her whip down with such force that the air screamed, but Godfrey's charge met the blows without a scratch. Godfrey swings his sword backward in a savage arc, forcing Natasha to dodge again. Her whip lashed out again and coiled tightly around Godfrey's chainmail at his neck as he yanked back with all his strength. The force was so great Natasha was ripped off her feet, hurtling toward him. Roaring, Godfrey swung his long sword backward in a diagonal strike that tore across her body, and Natasha fell limp as blood sprayed over him. The bloating venomous frog explodes after Mountain turns its own venom against it with a stronger dose. The detonation shakes the ground as Mountain advances and stops before Godfrey, sword and shield raised while Godfrey stands frozen over Natasha's corpse. Godfrey rested his long sword against his pauldron and asked Mountain why he had not said he could speak, while Mountain answered with a slow nod. Godfrey exhaled hot breath inside his helm, turned, and strode deeper into the cavernous hall while Mountain followed silently behind him. He knew he could not handle whatever lay beyond without it, and now that Mountain had copied the bloating venomous frog's innate bloating venom ability, he felt a little more hope against what awaited. At the end of the cavernous hall, Godfrey told Mountain to go first, and Mountain leapt into the ravine below. At once, an undead werewolf lunged out of the shadows, its its rotting flesh hanging loosely and one half of its face stripped down to exposed skull. Mountain met the beast with a shield strike that slammed it into the cavern wall, and Godfrey dove down to skewer one of the rushing monsters through the head as he landed. Mountain deflects the second attack, drives his sword through the creature's chest, and charges forward with his shield raised high. Any undead werewolf that came within reach fell in a strike or two, a feat impossible for him in his normal state. Godfrey finished what Mountain had left crippled but not slain, and after more than 20 kills they stumbled into an underground circular hall. 6 towering pillars ring the space, and at its center, a crimson core pulses atop a small stone platform. Above, the ceiling shimmers like a sheet of crystal-clear water suspended in midair, glowing faintly and casting the only light like a phantom moon over the shadows. As Mountain advanced, a black blur burst from behind a pillar, smashed into his shield, and drove him backward before twisting toward Godfrey, who raised his blade and was slammed into another pillar. Revealed in the crimson glow, the blur is a towering werewolf king standing fully upright on 2 legs, with massive muscles, twitching lupin ears, bared yellowed fangs, and black obsidian claws. Mountain roars as he slams the werewolf king against the wall, then reels from the beast's claw strike and the force of being hurled into a pillar. The stone cracked like spiderwebs before collapsing, and Godfrey exchanged places with Mountain to strike from the opposite side. Godfrey's sword bites into the werewolf's arm and stops against iron-hard muscle, and he realizes the bloating frog's venom has failed. The werewolf king's speed and power overwhelm the defenders as Godfrey recoils in dread and is hurled through a pillar. Mountain ducks beneath the werewolf king's swing and answers with a glowing blade strike infused with mana. A beam of light erupts upward, cutting deep into the werewolf king and leaving Godfrey stunned by Mountain's adaptive skill. Godfrey tells Mountain not to speak if it hurts and urges him to take the core. Mountain nodded, stepped forward, and grasped the crimson core as mana surged through him and transformed his body. Godfrey watched the tablet update with Mountain's new status. 3 weeks later, Godfrey stepped into the hallway of Manhattan High School with a bag slung over his shoulder. The crowded hallway fell silent as Godfrey fixed his gaze on Snow, who leaned against the wall while a shy first year stood before him with a present, and Siegfried lingered nearby like a bodyguard. Snow raised an eyebrow and smiled sharply as she asked Godfrey how his head was after Siegfried's hard hit. Godfrey insisted he was fine and tried to walk past, but Siegfried seized him and slammed him against the wall as his skin hardened into green jade. Siegfried grinned maliciously and threatened Godfrey, while Godfrey coldly told him to get off. Godfrey grabbed Siegfried's arm and wrenched it away, leaving Siegfried stunned as their eyes locked. Godfrey turns away and leaves while Snow watches him go, sensing that the boy has changed after entering a dungeon. Godfrey believes the difference between their summons is too great and predicts that talent will prove stronger than hard work. Maldred scoffs at Snow's decision and vows to kill Godfrey. Godfrey sits in the classroom as Isolde turns toward him, removes her earpods, and brushes his blonde hair back with a frown. Isolde pouted as she said that Godfrey had gotten into a fight, then rearranged his hair and smiled proudly. Godfrey chuckled, while Dale clenched his jaw and his expression darkened as students whispered about Isolde's rapid rise to the Nexus Club and her crowning as queen. Cecil narrowed her eyes at Godfrey and decided to investigate the rumor for the school news. Whether the rumor was true or false, she intended to expose the secret Manhattan staff was hiding, and Snow's expression shifted when he saw Isolde leaning casually on Godfrey's desk. Teacher Edwin apologized for arriving 20 minutes late after spilling coffee on his shirt, then cleared his throat and opened his notes. He reminded the class that the upcoming competition would decide their points and possibly the next valedictorian, emphasizing the importance of their summons. He announced the day's topic as innate and adaptive skills, focusing on adaptive skills because innate ones were fixed from the moment a summon manifested. Godfrey and Isolde both zoned out during the lesson. Later, in the cafeteria, Godfrey walked in alongside Isolde, hands in his pockets. Isolde ordered chocolate cake for both of them and some extras, then carried the tray to a corner table while Godfrey asked whether she had ever been to a dungeon. Isolde admitted that she looked down on others as insignificant, and Godfrey compared the gap between them to a fully grown dog and a puppy before asking whether the wyvern was her only summon. Isolde denied the claim, explained that wyverns could not sever a summoner's bond or banish mana, and then revealed that she was an 8.5 summoner. At that moment, Godfrey felt overwhelmed by John's intimidating presence as the silver-haired boy entered the cafeteria with a dark-haired Asian student, and the surrounding students whispered in awe. John nodded at Isolde, ignored Godfrey, and approached Snow to ask for a private talk. Snow rose seriously and asked where, and John turned to lead the way while Dale remained nearby, and the cafeteria buzzed with rumors that Snow might be groomed to become the next Manhattan King. Cecil thought about the difference between John and Godfrey, while Godfrey quietly asked Isolde whether John was Manhattan's king, and Isolde confirmed it. Godfrey expressed disbelief, and Isolde suddenly said that she had a problem because she had been exercising exercising at the school's field every morning for a week and disliked the way Dale stared at her. She asked Godfrey to join her the next morning for protection, and he agreed with a reluctant eye roll when she set the time for 4 a.m. Godfrey thought about 2 summoners who would change the world. Adam, the first summoner with a monstrous summon that could clear dungeons quickly and mimic other summons, and Cain from Patmos, who rose after Adam vanished with a twisted desire to become God. Cain caused the 5 years of great despair, killing 2 billion people and spreading nuclear devastation. He built a fanatical army during the Blood March, slaughtering millions and forcing cities to worship him or perish. Despite nuclear strikes, Cain's summon remained unstoppable until 7 great cities, including Manhattan, united to defeat him. The current Manhattan was technically New Manhattan, rebuilt after the original was destroyed a century ago. The next morning, Godfrey found Isolde waiting on a bench at the campus field covered in fog, and she removed her earpods after he called her name twice. She placed one earpod in Godfrey's ear, and he listened to the captivating, soothing, and melancholic melody. They began jogging together, while Godfrey remained unaware that Dale was nearby. When the song ended, Isolde's expression sharpened, and she increased her pace to test Godfrey's strength. Godfrey pushed himself hard, gaining ground but never closing the gap. After an hour of training, Godfrey collapsed onto the grass, panting heavily while Isolde stood over him, barely winded. Isolde, Snow, and Dale led the front while Godfrey trailed behind, still running despite his trembling legs, as Siegfried mocked him loudly from the side. Godfrey finished his laps and collapsed to his knees as Isolde rushed toward him with a bottle of water. The instructor snapped at Siegfried to shut up and told the others that while Godfrey had trained non-stop early in the morning, they had slept, yet Godfrey finished the task that left them sprawled on the ground. The instructor said they were making a mockery of themselves, and Dale's face twisted with heat and fury as he slammed his fist into the ground, shattering it and spraying dust and soil outward. Dale roared at the students to move, then strode in and sat heavily on the front desk to command silence. Godfrey entered the class, gulping water from a bottle as Isolde walked beside him, and Dale's fury sent lightning bursting from his fingers into the bottle and through Godfrey's body. Godfrey grunts as the shock horses through him without knocking him down, while Dale rises from the desk with lightning crackling around his fists and starts to protest that Godfrey has insulted him, only to have his words catch in his throat under a crushing presence. He barely breathed or moved under the aura of a Lord Tyr. He saw Isolde, whose calm expression had turned sharp and furious, and Godfrey tossed the empty bottle into the bin before walking straight to his seat without speaking. Isolde's gaze lingers on Dale before she turns away, and Dale feels the crushing weight lift as he spits that Godfrey hides behind a woman, trembling with rage while staring at Godfrey. Cecil frowned, noting that Godfrey showed no pain despite the lightning, and wondered whether he had grown that much in 1 month. Isolde spoke, telling Dale to sit down, and Dale clenched his fists before obeying and returning to his seat. Isolde ignored Snow's muttering and gently slid one earpod into Godfrey's ear, whispering that the competition was only days away and that he should unleash his anger then. Godfrey glanced at her from the corner of his eye as the staff lounge buzzed with talk about the upcoming competition, and the school nurse praised the sophomores' rare talents. Edwin, in charge of the class, predicted that Isolde, Snow, and Dale would place first, second, and third, while Cecil would not be able to match Dale. Godfrey Daniels steps out into the arena, narrowing his eyes beneath the bright sun and the weight of hundreds of watching students. Godfrey realizes he has been chosen first and that Snow's lackey is meant to test him early, while the freshmen watch with mixed disappointment and anticipation. Godfrey approached from the north and stopped 30 meters from Maldred on the platform. Godfrey remembered the blow Maldred had given him and answered that he would show Maldred mercy today. Maldred's grin twists into fury as he summons a 5-foot-tall beast from a portal beside him, and the iron-tusked porcupine boar appears before the referee's announcement. Maldred taunted Godfrey to bring out his knight as a golden diagram blazed behind him and the mountain stepped forward, casting a vast shadow across the arena floor. The mountain had grown to 7.5 feet tall, his great helm crowned with a fan-shaped metal crest and a blazing golden sun motif. Mountain's heavy cloak billows as he brandishes a great oval shield and long sword, looking every inch the royal knight captain, while the referee announces his elite tier 4.0 rise and the students stare in surprise. Mountain advanced with longer, faster strides as the quills clattered harmlessly against his steel hide. The porcupine boar unleashes another hailstorm of iron-infused quills, but Mountain raises his shield and reflects the damage as the beast charges in fury. Golden lightning crackled across Mountain's armor as he activated lightning infusion and drove his shield into the boar's skull, snapping a tusk and hurling the beast into the fractured stone platform. Maldred darted past Mountain and locked eyes on Godfrey, but the Mountain's long sword slams into the stone floor. Mountain pulled his long sword free and began a slow, deliberate march toward Godfrey. A freshman stammered in disbelief as the referee named Godfrey the winner and Maldred was hauled away, while Siegfried blocked the north door and threatened him. Godfrey raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and walked past Siegfried as Siegfried ascended the platform. Siegfried summons a wolf as jade begins to envelop his body and reshape his hands into monstrous paws. His tongue turned gleaming jade as he licked his lips, then he crouched low and launched himself at the dire wolf in a powerful leap. The creature lies flattened under the crushing blow as blood bursts from its maw and its fangs shatter, while Siegfried lifts the direwolf's summoner by the throat with one clawed hand. The boy dangled in midair as Siegfried strangled him with one arm, still staring at Godfrey while the referee shouted for him to stop. Siegfried clicked his tongue, tossed the boy to the ground, and whistled cheerfully while the student gasped and clawed at the air. Isolde spoke softly to Godfrey, asking whether he would be okay facing Siegfried, and Godfrey kept his eyes fixed on Siegfried's wolf as he said he had been watching it for a long time. Isolde ascended the platform and faced the blue-haired girl as the challenge hung in the air. The girl raised her hand, and a dark blue diagram summoned a unicorn as the referee announced, Gemstone Unicorn, Elite Tier 4.4. Isolde strikes the girl's gemstone spear as the unicorn charges, shattering it in midair. Isolde lowers her head as the shards whip back toward her, and her eye remains intact despite the strike. The girl froze as her unicorn collapsed, foaming at the mouth, and she fainted in the saddle while Snow explained that Dominion was a summoner's skill that projected a great summon's aura through the summoner's eyes and could kill depending on power and will. Teacher Edwin asks the combat instructor about the Dark Horse, noting that Dale, Snow, and Isolde have dominated their opponents. The tournament continued with whispers of Isolde's dominance, briefly interrupted by fighters like Cecil and Orwin, but even their efforts were measured against Isolde's display. Snow knocked opponents unconscious with casual slaps, and Dale electrocuted his challengers. Godfrey fought twice and was called again for his deciding match to determine advancement to the quarterfinals. Godfrey stepped onto the platform to face Siegfried as the crowd gasped and whispered about their history. Cecil said Siegfried's summon was balanced and could challenge a 5.0 at its peak, predicting that Godfrey would not win. Isolde watched silently as Godfrey summoned Mountain, the knight, and Mountain's golden armor darkened to crimson while his long sword turned obsidian under blackout state. The referee announced Knight Captain of the Golden Order, Elite Tier 5.0, and Siegfried lost his composure as Dale and Isolde reacted in stunned disbelief. Mountain hefted his obsidian longsword and marched forward as golden lightning arced across his armor and carried him out of the danger zone. Siegfried howled as he descended from above, but Mountain let the claws scrape harmlessly across his bloodjade transmuted armor before driving his shield upward to launch Siegfried back several meters. Mountain unleashes a surge of mana through his obsidian blade as Siegfried slams his palm into the ground, and 4 jade walls rise to box Mountain inside. Siegfried's manic grin freezes as the wolf convulses in agony and jagged spikes erupt across the prison floor. The jade walls collapse, revealing Mountain crouched on his great shield as the reflected damage strikes the summon, and Godfrey swaps places with him at the last moment. Mountain raised his shield, deflected the spike's force, and carved a massive gash across the wolf's crystalline hide as Siegfried charged Godfrey and was funneled into Mountain's path by the shifting positions and the blood-red spikes sealing the exits. Siegfried panics as Mountain's spikes rise into a ribcage-like prison, even while he stretches out his hand to summon a giant dog beside Godfrey. Siegfried activates exchange and appears beside Godfrey as the jade-eyed wolf lunges at his neck, while Godfrey summons Echo and Mountain's armor crackles into place around him. He evaded the wolf's jaws and delivered a devastating uppercut, knocking Siegfried out in a single blow as his jade skin receded. The wolf roared and burst forth with renewed speed but slammed into a metal shield Godfrey summoned. Its claws tore through the shield, but Godfrey retaliated with an Echo long sword, which bounced harmlessly off the wolf's jade skin. The wolf tried to crush Godfrey, who discarded the shield, rolled aside, and vanished in a flash of light. Godfrey reappears as an 8-foot-tall knight in crimson armor, strikes the wolf with a massive sword and shield, and then stands bareheaded over the broken beast. Orwin expressed disbelief that Godfrey had beaten Siegfried, while Cecil observed that the knight's innate skill and growth rate might rival those of the dragon species. Dale dismissed it as Siegfried's carelessness, and Cecil added that the summon could copy and enhance innate skills while also possessing intelligence. Gasps and whispers spread among the students at the arena as the referee declares Godfrey the winner and announces that Cecil will face Godfrey first in tomorrow's matches. Cecil smiled sharply, revealing that her summon was 5.8 tier, mastered Muay Thai, and lacked an innate skill. As Godfrey left the platform, Orwin chuckled that Godfrey did not realize his fate was sealed. Godfrey lay on his bed in the dormitory, staring at the ceiling after returning from the cafeteria with Isolde. He considered Cecil's summon, a 5.8 high tier with fearsome intelligence and mastery of ancient martial arts, and felt a creeping sense of hopelessness as he realized Mountain stood no chance. Closing his eyes, Godfrey retreated into his soul space and faced the great great door, sensing that a little more of Mountain's strength would fully unlock it. He opened his eyes, sat up abruptly, went to his desk, and searched for green dungeons in Manhattan on his laptop. A girl tearfully records the entrance of an abandoned subway station while speaking brokenly about her father and younger sister. Godfrey recognized the necklace worn by the girl from the video, closed his laptop, and left the school grounds in a black hooded jacket as the sun set. The driver asked if it was safe for a kid to be out late, and Godfrey assured him that he would be fine. Godfrey descended the dusty staircase into the subway as rats scattered at his footsteps, and his torch revealed 15 hobgoblins in mismatched steel armor at the far end of the station. Godfrey locks eyes with the hobgoblin chief as the chief shouts for his warriors to hold him. The hobgoblins charged with shields and sabers, and Godfrey answered by smashing through their attack with a lightning-crackling gauntlet. 2 more hobgoblins attacked, and Godfrey raised his gauntlet forearms to deflect their saber strikes while locking eyes with the chief hobgoblin, who chuckled arrogantly. Godfrey retreated while the chief shouted another command, and Mountain appeared in a burst of golden light before slapping the chief's head off against the station wall. Mountain, empowered with lightning infusion, swings his blazing longsword as Godfrey finishes the fight by punching one hobgoblin into the wall and forcing another to impale itself on a spike. Godfrey summoned his long sword mid-motion, shattered a hobgoblin's blade, and drove the weapon into its neck as the battle ended around him. Godfrey said that, for the first time, going back seemed like the way forward. At the top, they encountered an alien sky with a vast purple moon and red stars. Godfrey and Mountain stop in the canyon as Godfrey looks up and spots hobgoblins crowding both ridges above them. Stones rain down from above as Mountain raises his shield to cover Godfrey from the attack. Mountain drops to his knees as the orc's crushing blow drives his shield down and the rocky ground caves inward beneath him. The goblin general pointed the club at Mountain, then divided into 2, and then the 2 split again, while 4 goblin generals surrounded Godfrey and jeered. Mountain stepped forward as his armor turned crimson and crackled with black lightning, and then he split into 4 armored copies under the purple moon. The goblin general swung his club with a war cry, but Mountain blocked the blow with his shield and dug his ironclad boot into the rocky ground. Mountain retaliates with a thrust, cuts into the goblin general's left ear, and drives forward with a brutal headbutt. One of the goblin general's copies was slammed against the wall by one of Mountain's doubles, its chest crushed beneath an ironclad boot. The goblin general cried out, seeking aid and trying to retreat, but Mountain unleashed a mana slash, severing the general's club-wielding arm. The general clutched the bleeding wound and watched his copies lie dead as 3 more crimson steel knights advanced, while dozens of hobgoblins descended on rope ladders with roaring battle cries. The goblin general tried to flee but found 3 hulking mountains closing in, and the hobgoblins swarmed toward Godfrey and his summons from every side. Godfrey retreated to join Mountain and formed a round barricade with the 3 copies as mana surged through his body. He opened his eyes and found himself at the end of Mountain's chamber, staring at a massive ornate double door of wood and brass bearing the insignia of a great warbow. The doors swing inward, revealing another hall with a plain stone door on the left and an armored figure seated upon a polished wooden throne on the right. A massive warbow rested on 2 iron hooks above the throne, and the knight rose, lifted it, and descended with heavy steps. Godfrey summons the bow knight captain of the Golden Order as the towering figure lowers himself into a respectful bow instead of striking. In blackout state, the bow knight could break his base strength limits and summon up to 100 golden bowmasters. Godfrey opened his eyes in the real world and stood before Mountain in the darkness. The dungeon core was destroyed, and the dungeon collapsed after the brutal battle, leaving Godfrey to rise and open a portal to the abandoned subway station. The light scattered the nocturnal creatures, and another huge knight emerged, slightly shorter than Mountain but radiating an imposing aura. His crown marked him as a noble born of war. Ballista turned toward Mountain, and they exchanged a quiet nod while Godfrey stood small beside them as if under their protection. Ballista braced the bow on the ground and drew back the string with a conjured arrow ready to fire. Godfrey quickly retrieved both Ballista and Mountain as 2 intruders descended the staircase with their phone torches raised toward him, and one of them dropped a torch in the scramble. Godfrey covered his face with his hood and walked past the wary man and woman as they questioned what kind of summon they had just seen. At the headmaster's office, Evangeline informed Sebastian that the quarterfinals had begun, and Sebastian watched the contestants with wary doubt as the boys' gauge reading still seemed unbelievable. Orwin summoned a huge diamond-armored scorpion. The referee announced it as an elite tier 5.4 summon. Dale's armored Emperor Bull struck it with lightning, and Orwin conceded defeat before retrieving the summon. From the classroom window, John chuckles while the Nexus Club watches the arena, as Percival comments on the upcoming humanoid summoner fight, and the red-haired girl argues that humanoid summons are pathetic and make summoners' lives miserable. Percival defended John's summon as different. While Godfrey approached the platform, Dale descended, and Cecil summoned a towering ape-like monster. The referee announced the summon summon as Titan Yaogwai, high tier 5.8, and someone in the crowd shouted that Godfrey was toast. Cecil stroked her summon's thick leg and told Godfrey that Bane was excited because he liked it when the crowd was watching. She asked whether Godfrey was scared and reassured him that she was not a brute like Siegfried, while Godfrey noticed a golden diagram flaring more brightly behind him. Cecil watched the symbol at the top change from a shield and soared into a giant warbow and stared in surprise as Ballista emerged. In the headmaster's office, Evangeline told Sebastian that Ballista was a 5.0 elite tier summon with a potential of 7.0. Sebastian frowned, suspecting that this summon and the previous one were part of a set, which meant Godfrey might have more summons. Cecil tried to calm herself, but Ballista entered blackout state and rose to tier 6.0. The referee fell silent as the crowd erupted in astonishment at Godfrey's summons, while Orwin warned Dale that the Titan Yaogwai would not be defeated easily, and Dale agreed that the bow looked impractical. A freshman mocked Godfrey's bow loudly, and at Cecil's silent command, Titan Yaogwai charged at Ballista as Ballista slammed his bow against the stone and knocked a shining arrow. Ballista drew the bowstring with his whole body as the Yaogwai approached, and then released the arrow into the Titan Yaogwai's shoulder, hurling it backwards several meters. The Yaogwai roared, leaped high with mana gathering in its fist, and then sprang again as Ballista appeared beside Godfrey and fired a rapid volley of arrows. After the fifth arrow pierced the Yaogwai's abdomen, it staggered before Godfrey, bleeding heavily, and Ballista struck its chin with the bow hard enough to send the Titan crashing to the ground, staring up at the sky. Medics rushed in to take the summon away, and Isolde clapped alone in the arena, while the others stared in disbelief as Snow's expression twisted at the sight of the freshman who had mocked Godfrey. Cecil left the platform with a cool, unreadable expression after staring at Godfrey and silently vowing to expose his secret to the whole school. Godfrey fist-bumped Isolde and left as she stood atop the platform, while the crowd's shock at his victory gave way to awe as Isolde summoned a towering white wyvern. Snow summoned a large butterfly with a broader wingspan than the wyvern, shimmering with iridescent colors. The referee announced Isolde's white wyvern as high tier 7.0 and Snow's glimmer wing butterfly as high tier 6.5. Snow demanded that Isolde reveal her second summon as their creatures rose into the sky. The glimmer wing butterfly beats its wings and scatters red and green glimmers as the white wyvern rises into a graceful turn above the arena. Its alabaster scales glittered like shards of ice under the sun. The wyvern unleashed a frosty beam, but the glimmer wing butterfly instantly answered with Aegis Shield, and a student gasped that the wyvern had used Dragon's Breath. Lilith complimented Snow's summon for learning item manipulation and creating a durable Aegis Shield from Glimmer that blocked the ice breath, noting why Snow had his eyes on John as his successor. The wyvern launches freezing beams again, but the butterfly answers with an Aegis Shield as Snow's summon unleashes a spiraling hurricane of glimmers that engulfs the wyvern in iridescent light. The wyvern flew out seemingly unharmed, then dove downward at reckless speed toward the platform, petrified mid-flight by the red glimmers, its alabaster body turning gray and brittle. The audience demanded that Isolde act, but the glowing diagram beneath the wyvern caused it to vanish as its master recalled it, and Snow then challenged Isolde to reveal her second summon. He waved his hand, materializing 6 crimson glimmer javelins in the air, demonstrating his summon's adaptive ability, item manipulation. Some freshmen whispered that Snow might win the fight, awed by his skill. Snow charged forward, his summon releasing 2 more hurricanes of glimmer while he doubled the number of spears circling him. Isolde lifted her right hand as a violet beam twice the size of a man blossomed above her palm and condensed into a small orb that dragged dust and stone fragments inward. Snow stood beside the referee outside the platform as the violet burst faded and his summon and powers were cut off. He saw half the platform destroyed, with a 100-meter deep crater at its center streaked by violent violet energy, while Snow clenched his fists in rage as Isolde walked away without looking back. Godfrey clapped with a proud smile as Isolde accepted water, and John's admiration turned dark when he saw her charming smile toward Godfrey. Lilith chuckled and remarked on Isolde's closeness with Godfrey, prompting Yuan to glare at her. In the headmaster's office, Sebastian told Evangeline that Godfrey and Dale would compete in the semifinals, with the winner facing Isolde for first place and the loser taking second. Evangeline noted that if Godfrey was a king tier, the Shadow King of Manhattan sat beside its undisputed queen, and Sebastian voiced uncertainty about Godfrey's status and concern for the school's position as a humanoid summoner. As the sun set and students returned to their dorms, Cecil entered the boys' dormitory lobby, which was L-shaped with 3 doors. Cecil introduced herself as a sophomore who had come to see Snow, and Percival met her gaze from the bathroom doorway. Percival stops in his tracks when Cecil mentions having information about Godfrey. Percival's thoughts darkened at the mention of the humanoid summoner, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Snow deepened his frown and told Cecil to leave, saying that he did not care about Godfrey or his secrets. Cecil said she had overheard Miss Evangeline speaking with a staff member who mentioned that Godfrey might be a king-tier summoner, though she wasn't entirely sure, and that the school and Godfrey were hiding it. Cecil clenched her fist and declared that she would expose the truth, warning that if Godfrey was not king-tier his life would become miserable, and if he truly was king-tier, the authorities would come for him. Percival's eyes narrowed as he recalled how Cain and his fanatics had proven the danger of humanoid summons, and how a king-tier humanoid summoner meant a summon with intelligence, history, and its own civilization equal to its master. He thought that Cecil wanted to put Godfrey in a tough spot and sighed, acknowledging that she was setting Godfrey against people no student could resist. Snow asked why Cecil told him instead of Dale, and Cecil answered by scoffing that she needed stronger allies in case Godfrey truly was king-tier. In another dormitory building, Godfrey sat at his desk facing his laptop while Isolde teased him over a video call, saying she had expected him to tremble after her display of might. Godfrey chuckled and said he still planned to beat Isolde and take the valedictorian spot, but Isolde's sweet smile caught him off guard. A knock at the door interrupted them, and Godfrey had just opened it when the massive diamond scorpion lunged forward and drove its venomous stinger into his chest. Godfrey staggers backward, slams onto the floor, and lies immobile with his eyes wide open as the effort to summon power dies away midstream. Siegfried, Maldred, and Orwin entered. Orwin retrieved his summon, and Siegfried held a trembling freshman, Godfrey's dorm mate. Siegfried sneered at Godfrey's luck in having two summons and threatening Dale and Snow, yanked Godfrey's head up by his hair, and slapped his face twice, but Godfrey didn't react, his gaze glassy. Maldred muttered that Godfrey had lost all his senses and praised Orwin's venom as a knocker. Then Isolde asked if Godfrey was all right and who he was talking to after a sound came from the laptop. Orwin whispered that it was Isolde, and Siegfried laughed darkly before promising to keep Godfrey somewhere safe. Then Orwin jabbed the freshman, forcing him to spit out sticky webs that began wrapping Godfrey in a cocoon-like binding. They tossed the terrified boy aside and dragged Godfrey's bound body out, while Isolde shouted Godfrey's name from the laptop in alarm at the silence and lack of response. Her friend whispered that it was none of their concern and blamed the victim for provoking people like that, tugging her toward the female dormitory before Siegfried noticed them. Maldred asks whether they are taking Godfrey to the usual spot, and Siegfried answers with a wide grin as Orwin freezes at the sight of Percival under the streetlights. Percival's cold order hangs in the air as the others freeze, unable to move under the crushing pressure of his mana. Siegfried bellowed that Dale had sent them, but Percival scoffed and told them to scram after warning that their actions could get them suspended or expelled. Siegfried exchanged a tense look with the others before they backed away into the night, while Percival tore open the sack and found Godfrey's chest pierced by the diamond scorpion's stinger. Isolde storms into the nurse's office, ignoring Edwin's protest as she pulls the curtain aside to reveal Godfrey on the sickbed with a bandage wrapped around his chest. Isolde demanded to know why Godfrey had not been healed, and Julia explained that the venom from a peak elite tier summon was strong enough to knock out summoners between tiers 6.0 and 6.5, so recovery would take time. Edwin added that the venom was not life-threatening, but it had shut down all of Godfrey's senses and might keep him out of tomorrow's semi-final against Dale. Isolde's mana bursts from her body in waves as she hisses that this is Dale's doing, while Edwin tries to calm her and Siegfried's confession hangs in the air. Isolde stormed toward the door, but Edwin seized her wrist and reminded her to leave the matter to the school authorities, as her mother had instructed. Godfrey opened his eyes in the sickbed room, sat up with a grimace, and touched his chest in relief as the nurse stepped in with concern. Godfrey asked whether the contest had already begun, and then pressed the nurse about whether the school knew his classmates had put him there and that Dale had sent them. Godfrey exploded in anger and demanded to tell them he was done with Manhattan. Edwin told Percival that he would inform the headmaster before proceeding, and he calmly explained why the school would not suspend the promising students. Edwin calmly counters the instructor's argument, insisting that the field trip is essential for sophomore development and that the headmaster will not be moved by Godfrey's threat to leave. Evangeline rose in shock when Edwin delivered the news that Godfrey wanted to transfer, and she rushed to the headmaster's office to announce Godfrey's decision. Sebastian demanded to know where Godfrey was, and Godfrey answered curtly after Julia handed him the headmaster's call. Godfrey demanded 3 weeks instead, and Edwin laughed at the unexpected request. Edwin's thoughts collided as he questioned why the headmaster would risk provoking powerful families for one boy, while the combat instructor struggled to react to the 3-week suspension that marked Dale, Siegfried, Orwin, and Maldred beyond missing the field trip. Julia's gaze shifted to Godfrey, whose face lit up with a rare bright expression as Edwin questioned the effect of the suspended students on the sophomore elite's strength, and Evangeline praised Godfrey's new summon as having top-level high-tier potential. Edwin dismisses golems as lacking intelligence and growth, then predicts that Cecil's summon will surpass Godfrey's after the field trip. Sebastian cuts in to explain that Godfrey's summons are not golems and can take human form. Sebastian explained that the most dangerous summons were those that resembled humans, summoners, then revealed that Isolde was a dual summoner with queen potential and Godfrey was an unclassified summoner with a summon tier of 12.1 and potential beyond classification. Edwin and the instructor stared in disbelief at the impossible implication of a king-tier summoner's birth. Sebastian instructed them to keep Godfrey under watch until they understood him fully, and Evangeline confirmed they would keep it that way. Godfrey returned to his room, locked the door, and stared at the glowing core in his backpack after accepting Isolde's invitation and sending his complaints by text. Godfrey hands Mountain the glowing dungeon core as Mountain kneels and rises in power. Godfrey recognized Mountain's adaptive sword skill, dismissed Mountain back into soul space, and sat down to meditate and recover mana. Godfrey wakes to his phone ringing in the dark and answers Isolde's call to ask if they can reschedule their gym appointment because his room is still messy. Godfrey's eyes widened in alarm as Isolde's voice thundered through the door and phone, demanding a proper excuse about the cleaners. When he opened the door, Isolde stood there in leggings, a fitted top, and a cap, her golden-orange eyes gleaming with annoyance. Her expression softened with surprise as she noticed his messy hair, and Isolde told Godfrey to get ready, brushed past him, and flopped onto his bed as if she owned the room, saying she was waiting. Dane sat on the bench in the dumbbell area, staring toward the entrance while the boy in the yellow beanie reassured him that Isolde would still show up late. The beanie boy warned Dane that Isolde was different and doubted his chances with her, while the other boys scoffed and insisted Dane would not fail to get a girl. Their conversation stopped as Isolde entered the gym, and everyone turned to stare when the beanie boy warned that she was at least a high-tier summoner and noticed she had brought someone with her. Godfrey walked in beside her, clearly seeing the gym for the first time. One boy asked why Godfrey wore a headband, and Dane wondered whether Godfrey and Isolde were siblings because of their similar golden hair, though Isolde's had silvery white tips. The beanie boy decided they did not seem related as Godfrey and Isolde stood nearby. Godfrey began hammer curls with the two dumbbells while Dane rose to his feet and strode over, and Isolde stepped in to question why he was not dropping them. She added that he was no longer a normal human, and Dane grinned as if Godfrey had only just awakened. Godfrey said he had not deadlifted in a while, then set the weights down and casually lifted the 25 kilograms dumbbells without any strain. Dane's smirk faltered as Godfrey moved to the heavier racks and lifted a 60 kilograms dumbbell in each hand with effortless control. Godfrey told Isolde he could manage the weight, and Isolde continued her calm reps with the 500 kilograms barbell as Dane stared in disbelief before forcing a smile and hurrying toward the exit. One of Dane's friends exclaimed in shock as their leader bolted away. Godfrey waited until Dane was gone, then turned back to Isolde, caught her mid-lift with flushed cheeks, and quickly looked away before resuming his exercise. Isolde smirked faintly as Godfrey studied the bubble tea and asked what was inside it, prompting her amused surprise at his unfamiliarity. Godfrey replied that he had been in Amazon City, rarely ate out, and that his mother made sure he drank oolong tea, which he had brought some leaves of. Isolde watched in silent astonishment as Godfrey cautiously tasted the bubble tea, then nodded in approval after deciding it was good. Isolde laughed softly, her golden-orange eyes brightening, while Godfrey walked along the wide footpath toward the dormitory and thought about the upcoming field trip to the undead desert. Godfrey thinks about the new metals, alloys, and rare stones that have been discovered there, and how they let technology keep pace with summon power. Godfrey decided to research the beasts he would face so he could gain an edge in earning points during the trip. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Godfrey heard blows and grunts nearby and turned to see the upperclassmen beating a trembling freshman against the wall. Godfrey recognized Sam as the attacker and watched, irritated, as the freshman endured the beating without fighting back. Godfrey remembered his duty as a sophomore to protect the freshman and weighed whether to step in or warn others away. Godfrey dropped his backpack and told the upperclassmen to stop ganging up on Isaac. Godfrey said that Isaac was under his authority and that he would discipline him himself, while Derek answered with a hostile, mocking question. Sam sarcastically brings up Isaac's past injuries and suspensions. Godfrey tells them they have done enough and to let Isaac go, and Derek steps forward to throw a hard punch at Godfrey's nose. Godfrey moved left to avoid Derek's punch, broke Derek's glasses with a counterstrike, and kicked Derek to the floor while Sam and the others watched in shock. An upperclassman muttered about Godfrey's hand-to-hand combat skills and dual summoner abilities as Derek recovered, crushed his broken glasses, opened a portal, and summoned an Elder Warrior Ant. Godfrey summons Mountain and braces for the Elder Warrior Ant's quadruple Echo Slash after Derek warns him that he will regret his actions. Mountain absorbed the blows as his boots sank into the stone floor, while Godfrey yanked Isaac clear of the blast and the students stared in shock. Isaac gasped as he watched the summons clash, just as Mountain's shield slammed the ant into a tree and then into the dormitory wall. Mountain leapt forward, struck the ant's face, and hammered its head against the wall until the stone cracked and the creature went limp. Upperclassmen recoiled, Sam fled first, and Mountain suddenly backhanded Derek unconscious after walking past him. Godfrey said that Mountain mountain did not need to go that far, while Isaac dropped to his knees and kowtowed on the paved ground, apologizing and blaming Siegfried for forcing him. Godfrey picked up his bag and walked away while Isaac trailed behind him, as the freshman whispered about Derek's rank and the humanoid summon that had defeated him. Godfrey asked Isaac whether he would keep allowing himself to be bullied and what he hoped to achieve in Manhattan. Godfrey asked Isaac to show his summon, and Isaac admitted that the mammoth spider would not fit in the room. Godfrey frowned as Isaac answered meekly. Godfrey opened his laptop and studied the mammoth spider's elite tier stats as Isaac watched nervously beside him. Godfrey looked at Isaac and then back at the monstrous spider on the laptop screen. Godfrey realizes that the mammoth spider is a top-tier monster that awakens late, and he understands that Isaac must have spent his school years powerless and bullied until the scars hardened his mind. Godfrey tore a page from his notebook, handed it to Isaac, and watched him read the brutal workout list with a miserable frown. Godfrey activated Echo and summoned a long sword into his grasp while Isaac hiccuped in fright. Godfrey warned that a punch might be survivable, but the sword would not be. Isaac shivered as Godfrey ordered him to record every exercise live and then read the final warning about losing a fight. Godfrey replied that the school had a healer, smiling softly, but Isaac saw the smile as that of a devil.